Good morning, Portland. Thank you to the DevOps Days organizers for inviting me. I am super excited to be here. This is my first year in Portland as a DevOps Days speaker and attendee, but I've been coming to this city for several years to go to all sorts of awesome conferences you have, like the dearly departed Open Source Bridge and the super lively and active Write the Docs. You all throw some great conferences, and there's some serious coffee mojo happening there. So when I pitched and wrote this document, the Carolinas were not about to get smacked by a Category 5 hurricane. And it's kind of a lighthearted talk, and I want to say up front and acknowledge that it's not going to be funny, that it is going to be catastrophic and people are going to die, because that's what happens in crises. So even if I'm sort of making fun of the fact that there are hurricane-prone parts of the world, I don't want you to think that I don't care about what's going to happen. So with that, let's talk about disaster resilience. Yeah, you were working earlier. There we go. So the summer after my freshman year in college, I went to Alaska to work, like many of us do. It seemed like a good idea at the time. And I thought it was going to be like this. It was not like that. It was like this. This is the busiest Wendy's in Anchorage, Alaska. And you think, how busy could a Wendy's in Anchorage, Alaska be? I will tell you that it is half a mile from a very large Air Force base. It was pretty busy. I never actually learned to make food at this Wendy's. The only thing I did was work the drive-thru. And I was so fast at it that I would just set my cash tray on the counter because it was faster than having the computer make the change for me. So that was my daytime job. By night, I was a pool hall waitress. Education at work. I'm pretty good at 9-ball, though. So one of the interesting things about this is that I was working there, and the power went out during the middle of a lunch rush. And I was like, okay, now what do we do? Do we close? And the manager was like, no, we don't close. We work on reduced function. Like, if you don't have power, you don't have Frosties, and you don't have computer change. But you still have your radios, because those run on batteries, and you still have the flat top, and depending on whether you work your fry machine on gas or electric, you still have fries. So you can still make food. So what we were doing is operating in a reduced circumstance. This year, I've been thinking a lot about failure and disaster. I'm no J. Paul Reed, but it's something that I want us all to think about. And the most important definition of disaster is that it's an accumulation of failures. No one thing is a disaster. It is only failure on failure on failure that creates a real disaster. When you look at all of the after-action reports of disasters for like aeronautics or construction or software, it's not just that you had a bad shard in the cluster, it's that something happened to throw a bunch of traffic onto that bad shard, and then the cluster went down, and then you didn't have enough redundant capacity, and other clusters went down, and then there was like the weeping and the gnashing of teeth. So when we're thinking about failure and disaster, we have to think about them as on a continuum. With only a couple data points, you don't have a way to tell very well whether you're in the disaster path or the success path. The more you do, the more points that you accumulate to indicate what you're on. The other thing that can make a disaster happen in a hurry is a bunch of dependencies. Who here is feeling a shudder right now? What happened was NPM did something, or didn't do something, that seemed really logical at the time. They let people control the packages that they had submitted to this repository. And this person had submitted, it was 11 lines that buffered the left side of your program in case you had weird leading characters. No big deal. But it was kind of useful, and a lot of people used it. And they incorporated it into their packages. And those packages got incorporated to other packages. And what happened was, when that creator had a moment of anger about a namespace problem, he pulled that package. And that caused a cascade failure because the dependency trees ran much further than anybody realized. The system was fine. NPM wasn't down, but there was an unseen linchpin. So if disaster is caused by a collection of failures, what is victory caused by? What is the condition of flawless victory? Flawless victory is when all of your successes add up. So it works a little bit like this. Delivering a single success is delightful. Like, good job, you did the thing. A+, check it off your ticky box. Delivering success after success after success is piling up the 9s. 10 duckies is delightful. 100 duckies is, well, you have a duck store. 1,000 duckies is a great TED Talk. But what you're trying to do is have so many duckies that if one ducky fails or if one ducky stream fails, you still have a lot of duckies. In the ops sense, we think of not failing as a good day. But in a broader DevOps sense, we understand that while this is the goal, it is an unattainable goal. There is always something broken in your system. There's always something broken, something a little bit off, something that could be optimized, something that's not working perfectly. That's what we have error budgets for. Because if we try and do 100% success and 0% resiliency, our system is really brittle and fragile. And I am a person who travels a lot, and I typify how this could go wrong. I got to the airport, I left Oakland at 12:08 yesterday afternoon, and I took BART. I got to the airport at 1:21, and I boarded my flight at 1:41. Many people would consider this a lack of resiliency. If anything had gone wrong, if there was a long line at the TSA, if there was a police action on BART, anything had gone wrong, I would have missed my flight. That's a kind of brittle system. I need to think about whether that's enough resiliency for me to deal with 20 minutes of slop. But it's working for me so far, so I'm going to accept that. When I miss a flight, I'll be embarrassed. We're prone to think of success and failure as binary. Like, either it works or it doesn't. The test passes or it doesn't. But that's not how our systems actually work. That's not how it really is in our world. They're always broken, and they're always working, and there isn't really an absolute up or down. So when we're thinking about disasters and resilience, what we need to be able to think about is all of the gray shades between disaster and flawless victory. So let's look at this again. The area between the lines is the middle zone of performance. I tried to think of a cunning name for this, and I haven't come up with it. I'm sure it exists in the literature. It's good enough. It's functional. It's up. It's working. May not be perfect, may not be 100%, but it's there. And I want you to think about that zone as what we really want to keep. This talk was inspired by a really great article in December 2016 in 538. And it was about how Waffle House prepares for natural disasters by planning to exist in the liminal state between open and closed. I am not in the South, so I need to explain to you, Waffle House doesn't close. It doesn't close for Christmas. It doesn't close for the Super Bowl. It does not close. Some of them don't even really have locks on the doors because they are 100% open. They don't close for cleaning. So when we say what happens when a Waffle House closes, FEMA actually has something they call the Waffle House metric. No kidding. And what it is if your Waffle House in your community is closed, that's a red dot. And if it's open and functional to some degree, that's a yellow dot. And if it's fully functioning, that's a green dot. And FEMA works with Waffle House to chart this and identify where it is that disasters have hit most strongly. Because if your Waffle House is down, your town has been socked. You are underwater, you are out of power, and everything has gone wrong. And using that metric was really interesting to me because Waffle House has an entire disaster recovery plan. I tried to get someone to steal the disaster recovery plan for me. I tried to write the guy who wrote the article, or the guy who was in the article that 538 wrote. Evidently, Waffle House is super skeptical that anybody wants to talk about them at technical conferences. I'm like, but you have all this experience. We totally want it. I couldn't get the actual run book for how you do Waffle House in a bad time. But I will say that I know it exists because other people have seen it. The Waffle House menu has a lot of things that are cooked on the flat top. So if they have no power, but they have gas and water, they're okay. You can't have waffles because those are electric, but you can have eggs and bacon and hash browns, which is the important part. And everything goes on fine. You're serving a reduced menu, you're taking only cash, it's fine. If you don't have gas, but you do have electricity, you can have anything you want as long as it's deep fried, or waffles. You're not going to be able to do eggs, but at least you can get some food out and keep people fed in an emergency, because if you're having a bad time, I assure you their kitchen looks worse. The worst part is when you lose water. I have a food safety certificate, long expired, but I treasure it still. And the whole concept of food safety is basically predicated on bleaching your hands every 20 minutes. And that assumes potable water. You have to have drinkable water in order to perform the standard food safety handling tips. If you don't have that, I don't know how you do food safety handling, but Waffle House does. They have some system where they use a combination of porta potties and hand sanitizers and bleach and non-potable water, and they make it so that they are serving safe food. That's pretty amazing. So how many of you guys were pretty much in the eclipse path. How many of you saw the eclipse last summer? Right. Do you know that a year before that, every porta potty in the Intermountain West was completely booked out for that date? You could not get it. And the reason that happened was, it wasn't so bad here. Here we have infrastructure. Casper, Wyoming does not have the infrastructure for thousands and thousands and thousands of people. So we could predict they were going to need services like porta potties, and we could stage them and plan to have this excess flow. Like, we knew that was coming. If you had some kind of Woodstock-like event where nobody knew that it was going to be a big deal, then you'd be in trouble, because nobody would be prepared for that volume of people. In natural disasters, we frequently have geographic predictions of what's going to be hardest hit and what's going to be on the periphery. And we mobilize water and fuel stashes and trucks and porta potties and response systems on the periphery of the emergency. This picture is a group called the Cajun Navy. And after hurricanes hit Louisiana, what happened was this volunteer organization got together and decided that they had flat-bottom boats that could do shallow and deep water rescue, or fast water rescue. And what they were going to do is go help people the next time there was a hurricane. So this is them heading for Irma. And what they did was they left from Louisiana at the same time as the hurricane was hitting. And they're like, okay, it's going to take us like 10 to 12 hours to get there. By the time we get there, people are going to need help. That's staging at the edges. That's predicting, and that's responding before an event happens. And they're kind of awesome people. So what do we learn from Waffle House and their resiliency plan? Well, you need to plan for degraded service. Like, everything's a little bit broken, but what happens when it gets like kind of broken or sort of broken, or, well, some of it's up? You need to plan for that. You need to establish a way to restart from the unaffected edges into the most affected parts. Trying to restart from the ground zero of your disaster is less effective than working out from the unaffected edges in. If you think about that, that's how we handle most of our emergencies. And you need to focus on key deliverables. So many times when people say there's an outage, they're unclear about what is out. Is it, we can't make money because our shopping cart is down? Or is it, our ads aren't up? Maybe ads are crucial for you. Maybe that is your entire business model and you don't have a shopping cart. But think about what your key deliverable is and make sure that you're doing that first before you freak out about any kind of animation on your page, please. We're always reacting to last outage. Whenever we do an incident response or a post-mortem or whatever, we're talking about what happened last time. And we're talking about how we can prevent it for next time. But I want us to be thinking about the outage that we won't see coming. The problem is unknown unknowns. Like, we can handle known unknowns. We're like, at some point, AWS is going to barf on us. That's OK. We're multi-cloud, right? But what are we going to do about AWS was fine, but actually somebody drilled through our cable? That never happens. We never lose fiber. So in addition to planning for things that we can expect, we need to plan for things that we can't expect, which seems like super hard. How do you plan for something you can't expect? Well, a lot of our problems fall into sort of buckets or bins or categories, local and distributed problems. The connection problem, the poor throughput, some things are getting through. This is the worst kind of connection problem because if it's totally down, you know what to do. If it's kind of downish, how do you troubleshoot that? How do you know whether you're losing messages in your queue or if things are not working properly? Because it sort of works. It's kind of there. Regional outages. This is the 2003 Northeastern blackout. When works fine on my computer is parsed to works fine in my data center, you're going to have a problem if you lose your data center. And you have to think about how you have a regional problem and a distributed problem. And this is where I always make fun of Delta. I'm from Minneapolis, and they bought Northwest Airlines. And then they shut down the Northwest Airlines server room. And they're like, OK, that's fine. We have one in Atlanta, no problem. Who here remembers what happened to the one in Atlanta? It caught fire. It literally caught fire, like flames shooting out of the data center. So that was a bad day for Delta and for me for like 3 days because they didn't have a redundant data center. Like, how do you restore from it caught fire? It's not really in most people's runbooks. So if you're doing any kind of like, you want to serve the world, you're going to need to have things all over the world and not have things totally centralized and fallible. Slow failures are frequently upstream problems that are difficult to diagnose. We totally had this problem last week at Launch Darkly. We blamed PubNub for like a day. We're like, why aren't our messages, this is a queue, blah, 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 blah. We're freaking out about PubNub. When we did our incident report, somebody realized it wasn't PubNub at all. It was an AWS service that had gone down for 90 minutes and sort of like backed us up on PubNub. But that wasn't the cause. And it's really easy for us to misdiagnose upstream problems because we're sort of poking at black boxes. Like, is there a raccoon in here? No, there's not a raccoon, but there might be a service outage that hasn't been publicized yet, or that nobody at the provider has noticed yet. Slow failures are super hard to diagnose, but they're something we have to deal with all the time. Observation changes state. I notice this most on my desktop. Sometimes my desktop gets slow, a lot slow, super slow. Why is my desktop not working? Oh, I know, there's a runaway process. I'm going to open the system manager and find out what that process is. No, I'm not. The system manager requires that processor. My computer's already super slow, and now I'm going to set up something that's running to look at all the processes. This is a real Heisenbergian problem, because you can either observe the state something is in or change the state. Oh, wait, no, you're doing both at the same time. So system problems where you're having some kind of like massive overrun in your capacity are super hard to diagnose because you would use that capacity to diagnose them. My usual solution to this on my desktop is to reboot that thing because computers are like cranky toddlers, and sometimes they just need a nap. But that's not always a super great enterprise response. Enterprises need a nap too, so I'm just saying. And let's talk about the human factor, the bus factor, the alien abduction factor, the won the lotto factor. Sometimes people are not perfect. Turns out, even smart operators make mistakes, or need to go on leave, or forget to document something. So if part of your system operation has to do with a person doing a thing, you kind of have a vulnerability there. So how are we going to build that sweet spot between noticeable failure and difficult success? We're going to make our systems more resilient, more capable of handling failure and bouncing back. I am the English major most in love with state machines and state charts. I think they're super interesting because here's what you can do with them. It's a machine in the sense that it does work. It's the most fundamental definition of machine. And what you do is you determine all the possible states that your system could be in and how they got there, or how they could get there. And if doing this from scratch seems terrible, I suggest you go talk to your security team. And if you don't have security people who know all the states your system could be in, stop. You have some bigger problems than system resiliency. Because you need to know what your system could be in, or it could be in something really bad. And I don't mean down, I mean like feeding data to Russia, right? So once you determine all the possible states and all the ways it gets there, then you can start to harden those points that are vulnerable. You're like, oh, well, it turns out we only have cable into the data center from one direction. What if, two directions? How amazing would that be? Then when somebody goes through and tries to dig a ditch, we're not totally down, right? That kind of resiliency planning can only happen when you understand the states that you could be in. Now that you are hardening it, you're going to have to keep doing it. This is an incremental process. You are never going to be safe. You're never going to be perfect. You're going to be integrating and iterating for the rest of your life, because that's what ops is. Ops is not a finished state. Ops is a process. And DevOps is the process of doing this with humanity. If trying harder to fix something was going to work, it would have worked by now. Somebody told me this in a interpersonal sense, and she's right. Goodwill does not get you anywhere. I am a slightly chronically late person because I don't like shifting tasks. And one of the things that I decided was I was tired of always being late and apologizing to my friends. And the way to fix this was not try harder to be on time. It was work to be 10 minutes early. Set a measurable goal and strive to achieve that. Because better is bullshit. Better is not a goal. Better is like a kind of butter? I don't know. It's not a thing that you can actually do, but you can do 10 minutes early to every appointment. That's a thing that you can strive for and measure yourself against. Serve your minimum viable product. If you are having trouble, if you are having outages, you've identified what you actually need to provide to people, right? Serve that. Down is something people notice. Slightly reduced is something people feel sympathetic about. Strip out your animations, your ads, your cutting edge features, everything you can so that you are still giving them value for visiting you. Serving something is better than serving nothing. Think beyond the binary. How many of you remember the Twitter fail whale? Right? How many of you know the Mozilla dinosaur, yeah? You know that's a game, right? Yeah. If you hit the spacebar, the dinosaur jumps. It's great. These are things that are like, we know we're down, or you can't hit this page, or something has gone wrong. We are aware, and we're working on it. And in the meantime, be appeased with this dinosaur. And that seems really like dorky because you're not giving them any value, but you are acknowledging that they're experiencing a thing. I think this is why it is dangerous but interesting to put on amusing 404 messages. Like 404 haikus were a real thing for a while there, and I liked them a lot, but I was also mad because like the 15th time you get the same haiku, you're like, oh, you could fix your service. Talk to business. When something is breaking, you want to fix it using your tools, but you actually need to understand the problem from the user point of view so that you can fix it the way they need. So business is not the enemy. I know they ask a lot of unreasonable things. They are not the enemy. They are the subject matter experts of getting money. We like money. It pays us, and it buys the server space, and also the t-shirts and the socks, right? We like money. So if you have a problem, talk to business about how they think people will react. Set some service level things. I'm really hoping we standardize the terminology around which is what. OLA is an operations level agreement that's like within your company, what do you agree to provide to each other? And SLA is an external thing, what do you agree to provide to people who are paying you money. But whatever it is, set those, set some error budgets and say 99.9% of the time, we will be up, we will serve you these APIs. The rest of the time, no promises, no guarantees. We'll do our best. The more nines you have, the more expensive they get. If somebody wants 5 nines, just cost it out for them and say, do you really feel like paying $10 million for that extra 0.001%? Maybe they do. But you need to ask them before you just assume that's the best way to spend your cash. Circuit breakers and safety valves. Circuit breakers prevent cascade failures. They also react to emergencies better than we do. So if you could set something up that said, whoa, out of control, something's going on here, let's stop that and try again, it's going to prevent damage from your system. Traffic is pressure. The more traffic you have, the more your systems are under pressure. And you can add capacity, but you also need to add a release valve that says, suddenly we're getting a lot of data, and we just need to vent some of it out. And you need to set that to happen automatically because this kind of overflow happens really fast. And humans are the slow and fallible part of any system. Modular delivery. Come here, you. Thank you. Don't be all or nothing. I already said this like 3 times, but I care a lot about it. Even if you can't have waffles, you can have eggs. Even if you can't have like exchange rates, you can still have deposits. Whatever you can do to deliver something is going to be better than nothing. The great part about having microservices is that when one of them breaks, your whole system doesn't break. If one of your microservices breaks and your whole system breaks, you do not have microservices, you have a distributed monolith. It's a different problem. It's easier and faster to manage kill switches and targeted delivery if you use a tool that lets you manage whether a feature or module is off in near real time. Having to push a build is going to make it difficult to do that as a circuit breaker. Even with the fastest build system in the world, that push takes time. So think about ways to control your stuff without needing to do a rebuild. Define victory. I think one of the reasons that we stop at good enough and never reach flawless victory is because we don't know what victory is. We never define what it would be. We say perfect, and that's useless. So think about victory as a minimum. What is barely enough? What is just enough to get through? What's not bad? Like, what's like daily operational level? This is the equivalent of throwing a sheet over your kid and cutting some eye holes out for a Halloween costume. They're still going to get candy. Like, that's all you need. What is the best case scenario? Like, if you do not shoot for the moon, You're not going to hit the stars, right? So what is your ideal? What is your dream? Figure that out, define it, and understand that while you will always work toward it, it is Zeno's paradox. You will never reach it. But you still have to know what the finish line looks like. Because how can you be victorious, flawless victory, without defining it? Because I want to be Rainbow Unicorn Pusheen. So if this was too long and you read Twitter instead, make your failure more nuanced. Make success a bigger definition. Make it more than just not failing. And order the hash browns at Waffle House. I know it's called Waffle House. It's really about the hash browns. I like smothered. It's the way to do it. I'm here by the grace of my employer, Launch Darkly. If you want a t-shirt, we didn't bring a ton. Go ahead and take a picture of this and we will mail it to you. Thank you all for your time, and I hope you have a great conference.